Hello everyone, my name is Charlie and welcome back to a brand new Doctor Who YouTube video, where seeing as this is my 100th video, I thought I would give you 100 facts about Doctor Who. So this isn't going to be one of those boring and generic ones where it's facts that even casual viewers have heard of and most experienced Whovians definitely have heard of. Lots of these are going to be more obscure in detailed facts, that, are more tied in heavily with classic Who. I'll get onto that in a minute, by the way. So most experienced Whovians even will not have heard lots of these. So all of these are, sourced from the TARDIS Data Core wiki, which has loads of information about Doctor Who. Definitely go and check that out. And I have checked all of their sources, and, all of these seem pretty legit, so it's not like, fake facts. And to throw something else interesting into the mix, and, to tie in with the theme of 100, I thought I'd do one fact about each of the first 100 Doctor Who stories, so from An Unearthly Child, which is in the first Doctor era, to The Stones of Blood, which is the third story of season 16, which is Tom Baker's fourth season as the fourth Doctor. So, yes, without further ado, let's get into this video, and I hope you enjoy. 1963 to 1966, the William Hartnell years. An Unearthly Child. Due to the American President John F. Kennedy's assassination, the BBC decided that Doctor Who's first episode was overshadowed by the news, and was actually rerun just a week later, directly preceding the second episode, The Cave of Skulls. The Daleks. Most people believe that the Daleks' design was inspired by pepper pots, but Terry Nation's idea actually originated when he moved a salt shaker across a table while eating at a restaurant. The Edge of Destruction. This is always deemed a filler episode due to its short nature. This is because the producers were told they could make 13 episodes before advancing further. 11 episodes had already been created with An Unearthly Child and the Daleks, so this two-part character-building TARDIS adventure was formed. Marco Polo. While most listen to the audio or watch the Telesnap reconstructions on the Lost in Time DVD to see this story, the Telesnaps were also released in a special edition of Doctor Who magazine in March 2013. This is also the first completely missing story. The Keys of Marinus. Plenty of people will agree with me that Susan's characterisation in this story especially was subpar, and she was written as very childish and whiny. Funnily enough, her actress Carol Ann Ford thought the same thing, and was thoroughly displeased with the character's writing in this story especially. The Aztecs. This is deemed a great story, and Barbara's actress Jacqueline Hill agrees, stating this as her favourite Doctor Who story ever. The Sensorites. If you've watched the New Who stories The Impossible Planet, The Satan Pit and Planet of the Ood, you may have noticed that the Sensorites and the Ood look very alike. This is because Russell T Davies modelled the design for the Ood from the Sensorites. The Reign of Terror. After the somewhat controversial animation of The Invasion, Big Finish and Planet 99 Productions collaborated to produce a second animation trial in 2013 for episodes 4 and 5 of this story. Planet of Giants. This story was originally supposed to be the first episode, instead of An Unearthly Child, simply titled The Giants. BBC executives dismissed the idea at the time, but eventually accepted it for this story. The Dalek Invasion of Earth. As said before, Carol Ann Ford was extremely unhappy with how her character Susan was written. This got to such a point where she completely left the show after just 10 stories, making it the first companion departure. Ironically, I and most people will agree that this is actually Susan's best story. The Rescue. New companion Vicky's last name is never mentioned in the story or any others, joining Ace and Polly as companions whose surnames have not been stated in the TV show. The Romans. The Romans is the second story in a row where, surprisingly, the Doctor is given a physical fight sequence, something that wouldn't properly be seen again until The Enemy of the World and The Ambassadors of Death. The Web Planet. Working titles for this story include The Zarbi, The Centre of Terror and The Webbed Planet. The Zarbi name was reused for the Target novelisation. The Crusade. During the production of the story's third episode, Eon's actor William Russell was on holiday, so refused to film the sequence where ants crawl up his arm. Instead, production assistant Victor Rutelis would double as his character. The Space Museum. The first scene of this story is the last scene of the previous story, The Crusade, that making it the only footage that exists of the Crusade's final episode. The Chase. This story was originally the basis for a third Peter Cushing Doctor Who film, titled Doctor Who and the Dalek Chase. Sadly, the film was never made. The Time Meddler. For the programme's 40th anniversary, repeats of one story from each Doctor's era were shown. This story was voted to represent the William Hartnell era. Galaxy 4. This is Derek Martinez's only story not to feature a recurring villain. All his other stories involve Daleks, Ice Warriors, Cybermen and Autons. Mission to the Unknown. This story is the only story in existence not to feature the Doctor in any way or at all. This is the only pure Doctor-like story. The Mythmakers. This is Doctor Who's least existent story. No episodes or even telesnap reconstructions exist, with very minimal audio to listen to. The Daleks' Master Plan. The 7th episode of this story, titled The Feast of Stephen, contributes absolutely nothing at all to the plot. Coincidentally, it also features the first fourth wall break in Doctor Who, where Hartnell looks at the camera and wishes the viewer a Merry Christmas. The Massacre. This is one of but a handful of stories in which the Doctor never actually encounters the villains themselves. The Ark. For the monoid villains, actors had to hold a ping pong ball in their mouths to represent an eye, while their hair was made of wigs meant to resemble the Beatles. I think villains are a bit better later on in Classic Who. The Celestial Toymaker. The original plan for this story was to have the first Doctor regenerate for the first time due to Hartnell's deteriorating health. The idea was postponed until the 10th planet 5 stories later. The Gunfighters. This story, as everyone knows, features an original song titled The Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon. This would not happen again until The Greatest Show in the Galaxy 22 years later. The Savages. The Savages is the first Doctor Who story not to have individual episode titles. Instead, the episodes were simply numbered. The War Machines. This is the first Doctor Who story ever to take place in modern-day Earth, after a whole 3 seasons and 27 stories. The Smugglers. Due to budget limitations, this is the first story not to feature any music beyond the opening title sequence. The 10th Planet. This is the first time a season's 2nd story did not feature the Daleks. The next time a season's 2nd story would feature the Daleks is Series 8 of New Who with Into the Dalek. 1966 to 1969, the Patrick Troughton years. The Power of the Daleks. It may be hard to believe now, given how loved Troughton's Doctor is among Whovians, but the actor received heavily negative criticism during the story's duration. He even considered quitting. The Highlanders. This is, thank goodness, the last pure historical story. We do get the Time Warrior, City of Death, the Talons of Weng-Chiang and Black Orchid, but they do involve science fiction elements, so are not pure historicals. The Underwater Menace. Episode 1 of this story concludes a run of 12 missing episodes, spanning across 3 stories. The Moonbase. We all know that Classic Who sets were a bit wobbly, but during production the gravitron prop fell and almost seriously injured Troughton, landing mere centimetres away from him. The Macra Terror. The Macra wouldn't be seen again after this story until Gridlock 40 years later, making it one of the longest intervals between villain appearances. It is only beaten by the Great Intelligence and Alpha Centauri. The Faceless Ones. Out of all of their stories, Ben and Polly have the least screen time in this one, which is strange seeing as it's their last story. The Evil of the Daleks. This was originally going to be the last Dalek story, after having only 6 of them. This is because the BBC were planning to sell the rights to the Daleks to an American company so they could create a spin-off series. Thankfully that didn't happen, and we're getting Dalek stories to this day. The Tomb of the Cybermen. For the programme's 40th anniversary, repeats of one story from each Doctor's era were shown. This story was voted to represent the Patrick Troughton era. The Abominable Snowmen. Deborah Watling, who played companion Victoria Waterfield, confirmed this as her favourite story. The Ice Warriors. The titles for the individual episodes of this story were simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, rather than the traditional Episode 1, Episode 2, etc. The Enemy of the World. Both Patrick Troughton's son David and Fraser Hines' cousin Ian played guards in this story. David Troughton would go on to become a side character in the episode Midnight. The Web of Fear. All episodes are found in Nigeria alongside Enemy of the World, however episode 3 was sadly lost during transit. Thankfully it is being animated as we speak and a special edition will be released later this year. Fury from the Deep. This is the first story in which the Doctor uses his sonic screwdriver and is used for the grand purpose of unscrewing a screw. The Wheel in Space. This marks the first time the Cyberman design features the iconic teardrop motif in their eyes, which was followed up in Earthshock. The Dominators. As of 2021, this is the longest opening story for a season, at 5 episodes. The vast majority in Classic Who was a 4-parter. The Mind Robber. Episode 5 of this story, due to it being added in quickly afterwards, has a runtime of just 18 minutes, making it the shortest Doctor Who episode to date, not including minisodes and the like. The Invasion, 1968. This story was originally planned as a 4-part story, with most of the plot based on what we know as episodes 5, 6, 7 and 8, but the story was expanded to 8 when the next story, the 4-part Dream Spinner, fell through. The Crotons. The Crotons were written as a replacement for the Daleks, but sadly they didn't quite have the same impact and faded into obscurity. Just goes to show that you can't replace the original. Wait a minute. Moving on. Seeds of Death. When Zoe lets the Doctor include the Weather Control Bureau and falls into the foam, she is clearly laughing, as that wasn't scripted and Troughton simply slipped over. The Space Pirates. This is the only penultimate story in a Troughton season not to have a companion departure. The Faceless Ones and Fury from the Deep both saw Ben, Polly and Victoria leave respectively. The War Games. Episode 8 of this story, which is the least watched Doctor Who episode ever, actually is probably the most important, seeing as the Doctor is first described as a renegade Time Lord in the story. 1970 to 1974. Jon Pertwee years. Spearhead from Space. The Autons are the villains who appear in the most season openers: Spearhead from Space, Terror of the Autons and The Rose. Doctor Who and the Silurians. The reason why this story is named a bit differently is actually due to a simple paperwork error. Ironically, its target novelisation is one of a handful to completely change the title. The Ambassadors of Death. Caroline John's husband, Geoffrey Beevers, played a character called Private Johnson in this story. He would later play the Master in The Keeper of Traken. Inferno. The side character Petra Williams was originally meant to be played by Kate O'Mara, who 15 years later would be cast as the Rani. Terror of the Autons. Originally, instead of the Doctor being strangled by the phone wire in the iconic cliffhanger, it was supposed to be the Brigadier, as he tried to tell the Doctor the truth about the Daffodils. The Mind of Evil. This is the third story out of 11 not to feature the Doctor's TARDIS, the 2 before it being Mission to the Unknown and Doctor Who and the Silurians. The Claws of Axos. During location filming, the weather was highly unpredictable. However, writers managed to write this change into the story, with a throwaway line from the Brigadier about the axons affecting the weather. Colony in Space. Originally, the role of Morgan would be played by Susan Jameson, but the BBC decided to cast a male actor instead, because apparently that wouldn't be appropriate. The Demons. The shot of the helicopter exploding was in fact an unused scene from the Bond film From Russia with Love, 1963. This shot was also used in The Enemy of the World. Day of the Daleks. The mind analysis machine is the first occasion in which we see any images of William Hartnell or Patrick Troughton not in their era. The Curse of Peladon. This is the Doctor Who story with the most sequels, not including season 16 and 23 story arcs. The sequels are named The Monster of Peladon, The Prisoner of Peladon, The Bride of Peladon, and Legacy. The Sea Devils. During the scene where the Doctor and Jo abseil, those stunts were actually performed by Pertwee and Manning themselves, not stunt doubles. The Mutants. The side character Cotton may have been played by Colin Baker himself. If he had, he would have been played 2 side characters before becoming the Doctor. The Time Monster. One of the voices representing the Doctor's subconscious is female. This is the first reference to the Doctor being able to change genders after regeneration. The Three Doctors. The original name for Omega was simply Ohm, O-H-M, which is what the word Who looks like upside down. It was then switched to Omega as it basically sounded a bit better. Carnival of Monsters. The reason why the villainous Drashiggs have their name is because it's an anagram of dish rag. Actors looked at a dish rag hooked over a metal pole, so it looked like they were looking at a monster when actually they were added in afterwards. Frontier in Space. Jon Pertwee named the Draconians his favourite monster, mostly because of how humanoid and expressionate they were. Planet of the Daleks. The Supreme Dalek featured in this story is the first time we see headlamps on a Dalek instead of bulbs. The headlamps will go on to become the standard for New Who. The Green Death. This is the last story where the episode titles are in the format episode number instead of part number. The exception for this is Destiny of the Daleks. The Time Warrior. As everyone knows, this is the first story in which Gallifrey is named. However, in the original script it is written as just simply Galfrey. Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Part 1 of this story, like many Pertwee episodes, used to be missing. However, this is the most recently found. Death to the Daleks. This is the final Dalek story not to feature Davros before 2005. The Monster of Peladon. While recording the destruction of the Sonic Lance, actor Ralph Watson was temporarily blinded due to an accidental magnesium flare. Planet of the Spiders. As everyone knows, this is the story in which the Third Doctor has an iconic vehicle chase scene. The director added this in as a parting gift for Jon Pertwee, as he was very fond of chase scenes. 1974 to 1981, the Tom Baker years. Robot. This story was recorded during Planet of the Spiders, meaning that Jon Pertwee and Tom Baker literally played the Doctor at the same time. Actors Nicholas Courtney, John Levine and Elizabeth Sladen had to rush between sets to appear in the two stories. The Ark in Space. Writer John Luca Rossi, known for writing pure historicals in the William Hartnell era, gave these episodes individual episode titles, and he hadn't realised that they had been discontinued several years prior. The Sontaran Experiment. This was the second Doctor Who story to be shot entirely in location in Dartmoor, the first being Spearhead from space. Genesis of the Daleks. This is the most repeated Doctor Who story ever. It was shown on television in 1975, 1982, 1993, 1998 and 2000. Revenge of the Cybermen. This story is actually the last appearance of the Cybermats in Classic Who. They wouldn't appear again until 2011's closing time, a whole 36 years between appearances. Terror of the Zygons. The deleted opening scene of this story, where the TARDIS lands, was originally in black and white. For the DVD release, YouTuber Babblecolor recoloured it. Planet of Evil. This is one of but a few stories where the Fourth Doctor removes his scarf for an extended period of time. This is because he doesn't wear it in the antimatter universe, so it is easier to do the CSO. Pyramids of Mars. This is the only story in Classic Who in which every character, bar the Doctor and his companion, die. The Android Invasion. The Morbius Doctors, thought to be pre-Hartnell, post-Timeless Doctors, were the faces of the production team members who worked on the story. Seeds of Doom. The costume used for the humanoid stage of the Crinoid was made from an Axon costume painted green. The Mask of Mandragora. This is the only reason why this story wasn't companionless, was because Elizabeth Sladen wanted to be in the story, meaning her departure would be written into the Hand of Fear. The Hand of Fear. In terms of seasons, when Elizabeth Sladen left after this story, then she was the longest running companion for 3.4 seasons. Others who have come close include Fraser Hines, Janet Fielding and Karen Gillan. The Deadly Assassin. This story holds the record to be the only companionless story in Classic Who. Viewers wouldn't see another companionless story until season 4's Midnight. The Face of Evil. It is revealed in the Target novelisation of this that the Doctor's earlier visit to the planet of the Sever Team occurs during the events of Robot. The Robots of Death. Louise Jameson once revealed in an interview that she almost killed a cameraman during filming. In the scene where she throws a knife at the robot, she recalled it flying away and almost stabbing a cameraman in the back. The Talons of Weng Chiang. This story was originally meant to introduce the companion Leela, making her a chimney sweep instead of a warrior. Horror of Fang Rock. This story had a working title of Rocks of Doom. I think I'm glad they stuck with the original. The Invisible Enemy. In this story, in the scene where Leela is learning to write her name, actress Louise Jameson was told to write with her left hand instead of her right, to make the jagged look of the writing look more genuine. Image of the Fendal. Leela kissing the character Adam on the cheek was improvised by Louise Jameson, and the shock on Adam's actor's face is genuine. The Sunmakers. This story was actually based off of problems producer Graham Williams was having at the time, so he decided to commission a story about a parody version. Underworld. As everyone knows, this story ties in heavily with Greek mythology. Even the characters' names resemble Greek heroes such as Jason, Heracles, Atalanta and Orpheus. The Invasion of Time. The character Rodan is the first female Gallifreyan saw on television after Susan, even though we had 3 Gallifrey stories in between, in the form of the War Games, the Three Doctors and the Deadly Assassin. The Ribos Operation. Elizabeth Sladen, following the departure of Louise Jameson as Leela, was asked to return for season 16, but declined the offer. Romana was created instead. The Pirate Planet. The close-up of the Doctor's face in Part 2 was used in the 11th hour, shown in a holographic image of 11 of the Doctor's faces, the Stones of Blood. As well as being Doctor Who's 100th story, the programme celebrated its 15th birthday 2 days after Part 4 aired. And that is 100 facts about Doctor Who. Yes, I really hope you enjoyed this video, everyone. Do please feel free to comment below about what you thought of this video. It's, my goodness, a very long video. This is over 20 minutes long, I think. So, yes, I'm going to go now, but thanks for watching, everyone, and goodbye.